Today we are going to learn about the accounting equation. Who here has heard of the accounting equation? Anyone? Yes?
It is asset equals equity plus liability.
Correct. You have it. It is an equation. Very simple equation, but a very powerful equation. Please. As you can see, it's assets equals your equities plus your liabilities. But what does that mean? So let's go to the beginning. When a company wants to pull funds together, how do they do it? Equities and liabilities. They'll get a loan, or they'll have people invest in a company and buy into shares. You have other words, say debentures, which are more complex, but today we'll stick to the basics. So in order to fund assets, we have to get equity inflows of investments or loans through liabilities. Now let's move on. Do you guys have any questions before I move on?
No.
Okay. I want to hear from you guys, and I want you to tell me if you see an equity, an asset, or a liability in the following slides. Let's begin. What do you see there? What is this? Yeah.
An asset.
Correct. A house is an asset, but it can also be something else. And tell me, do you know? Yes.
I think it can also be a liability because you might acquire a loan in order to finance
And do you guys know what that's called?
a mortgage.
Yes. Okay. Correct. Well done. Let's move on to the next photo. What is this? Yes.
Assets.
An asset. Good. Now this is a truck. Why is it an asset?
Because it stands to bring in economic benefits into the business.
Correct. When we have assets in a company, they stand to earn economic benefits for the future when you purchase them through exchanging, as we said, either equities or liabilities. As the equation stands, there's a flow in this thing. We cannot have assets increasing without an equity or liability having an equal change. The same can be said that an asset cannot change without something happening in the equities or liabilities changing. Very simple, very basic, very powerful. Let's proceed. Next slide. What's this? You find it in factories, or your agricultural factories. What you see here is machinery. What's machinery? Asset or liability? Anyone?
Assets.
Correct. But there's also another catch. It is an asset. But what happens if you lease the equipment out? What then would it be qualified as? Anyone? It becomes a lease liability. And then you rent it, so to speak. And it can be more complex, but like I said, today we stick to the basics. So it can be two, depending on the circumstance. Let's move on.
I have a question.
Yes.
In terms of the machinery becoming a lease liability, how is it a liability but it's still bringing cash into the business?
When you look at contracts, you don't actually own it. You sign a contract saying you will temporarily use it for benefits. And under installment credit agreements or other forms of contracts, you cannot just happily say it's an asset when you don't truly own it. So if you lease it out, you cannot say you've got an asset all of a sudden, because you don't. You only have it temporarily with payments. You're only paying monthly for it. You have not paid for it. In other words, you have not used one of these as a significant form of capital to buy the asset. Simply, it becomes more of an expense in terms of transactions, and it will be reflected under a liability that decreases over time. Like I said, that's complex. We're not here to be complex. We're sticking to the simple. What do we have here on the slide? What is this? This here is the JSE. And all you see here is different kinds of assets. Not just any kinds of assets, they're immaterial assets, which means it doesn't fall under this. It becomes a form of funding. How did we say in the beginning you fund assets? Through equities. When people invest in your company, what are they buying?
Shares.
And what are you looking at?
Shares.
Exactly. Let's proceed with the class. That will be the end of the slides in terms of what we're seeing. What is our time looking like in terms? Alright, let's proceed here. I've got a little quiz for you guys. And to conclude this lesson, I just want to hear your answers. We can start at number 1. What's your answer? Anyone have any answers in mind?
Equity.
Correct. Correct. I can see you looked at the choice. You saw on the whiteboard there. There's the answer. You observed. Well done. Moving on to number 2. The owner invests personal cash in the business. What happens? There's a flow. There's a flow that happens. What increases, what decreases, what doesn't have effect. We already discussed that liabilities is these forms of loans. You don't actually own things, you actually go to a bank or an institution and you, with leverage, get capital under certain agreements, contracts. Yeah. Yes, your hand was up.
And I think owner's equity is going to increase.
Correct. The equity will increase. And you'll see that nothing much will happen with liabilities, no effect. And when it comes to assets, not yet, until it gets used for something. Right, and just to conclude the class, it's just the flow of money. We've got the balance sheet, we've got the equation, they're very similar. When you fund your assets, you're gonna buy assets with equities through shares or investors, and liabilities through going to the bank for financing.